Welcome to High Infidelity, the best cheating videos on YouTube. If you enjoy this content, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now let's get into the video.
Runaway husband. I feel like I'm in the minority. With my husband's adultery, I feel like I'm in the minority. He's never begged for another opportunity, never apologized, and has never looked back. I'll start by saying that I have no reason to believe my spouse has ever cheated on me. I'm a little more than 3 months away from D-Day. My SDBXH, male 36, and I, female 32, have been together for 14 years, 9 of which we have been married. We met in college, battled financially together in our early years, and ultimately purchased our first house, a beachfront condo, last year. We don't have any children, and I've been dealing with medical issues for the last 2.5 years, most likely endometriosis. This did put a crimp in our life, but just a few times in the last year owing to acute discomfort. I often praised him for being so patient with me at this time, and he would answer, "Men can take care of themselves, I just want you to get better." COVID made it difficult to see physicians, but I was finally able to begin the process of attempting to have this identified and fixed this year. We had a beautiful, unique friendship, absolutely best friends in my opinion. He has a decent paying job that he has worked his way up to over the years. I just have a part-time internet work and a yearly contract with his company. So he was unquestionably the breadwinner. I had no reason to believe anything was amiss. My husband appeared a bit more fatigued this year, but he was still constantly telling me he loved me and planned things with me, nothing out of the ordinary. Let me now present the OW. F28, she started working in his department 3 years ago. He used to complain about how unpleasant she was and how she wasn't a hard worker. Because the 3 of us had comparable degrees, I was a bit envious of her receiving that job so quickly. My hubby is a quiet person who enjoys computer games and is quite clever. She is an extrovert who likes drinking, going out, and is an active member of her church. He had been working 3 weeks straight, including weekends when D-Day occurred. He'd made up some early morning COVID test excuse to spend 2 of those nights at his boss's house, despite the fact that we lived 40 minutes away from work. Every other night during this time period, I had extremely late work hours, arriving home about 1 a.m. In retrospect, I assume he was out with her on several of these evenings, eating dinner, etc. I discovered additional clothes in his work bag at the end of May. He makes an excuse about attending a wrap party with coworkers after work. It didn't seem right, and I didn't believe him. After listening to my intuition, I informed him I was going to go 1,000 miles to my parents for a week. He didn't really argue with me about it. The red flag. I decide to go back the way I came and call him. Again, he doesn't sound particularly enthusiastic, and I can tell he's pretending to want me home. He tells me he has to phone his friends to let them know he won't be able to attend dinner after all. I discovered on his phone records weeks later that the friend he contacted was OW. He kept calling her off and on all night until I got home. It's strange when I go home and he goes to bed. I decide to go through his phone for an Uber receipt from one of the evenings he was supposed to be at his boss's house. It seems that he remained at OW home and returned to work at 11 a.m. the next day. So he certainly lied about COVID testing in the early morning and must have left his vehicle at work. It was one of those "this can't be true" experiences. I was trembling, but I roused him and confronted him with this truth. He sighs, as if trapped, and then continues, "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd misunderstand." "Sure, I thought you couldn't stand her," I asked. "I think she grew on me," he said. Those are phrases I will never forget. We talk/argue all night, with me weeping the most of the time. By the next morning, he had me persuaded it was all a misunderstanding, and that he had gone there instead of his boss's house since they had all drunk too much after work. When I sought her phone number the following day at work, he hesitantly handed it to me, saying that he was concerned she would get him fired over some misunderstanding. Another warning sign. I contact her, and she tells me she believed I knew he'd stayed the night, and she simply laps off any of my worries, claiming they never speak about anything personal. She believes he is just chastised for not spending enough time with coworkers. This is followed by 2 days of uncomfortable from him. I sense something is wrong and ultimately urge him to tell me. He claims he doesn't truly love me anymore, that he doesn't know what's wrong with him, and that he needs to be alone for a while. This was 4 days before his 36th birthday, so I kept wondering whether he was at the ridiculously young end of the midlife crisis age range. I had bought baseball tickets for his birthday, since he had appeared so enthused about it a few days before. This is all out of left field, and I'm probably still in shock, so I tell him, okay, I'll go home to my folks for a short while. Everything was left open-ended as we parted ways. Except for some vital paperwork and a few of my clothing, I left everything at home. My mill, God love her, even persuaded me to stay longer than I had intended. Don't make it simple for him to forget about you while you're gone, she said. He very completely ignored me when I left, with no phone calls, not even on his birthday. I received a few messages from him, but that was all. He was putting on the I'm alone taking care of myself act. Did I mention I'd had a biopsy the day before D-Day and was still waiting for the results? He didn't even call to inquire about it. He had been so nice and supportive throughout my medical appointments, and now he didn't want to speak to me. Finally, a few days after his birthday, I pleaded with him to just tell me what he wanted. If you have anything significant to tell me, do it now in person, not when I am 1,000 miles away at my parents' home, I remarked before leaving. So what does he do now? He calls and terminates our marriage. He declared that it was finished and requested a divorce. Just like that, 14 years, the guy I'd been with since I was 18 years old, gone in the blink of an eye with one cowardly phone call. I know my spouse, and if he said these things, he meant them. But I asked for a divorce. I asked for marital therapy. At this point, I still didn't believe it was an affair and assumed he was going through a difficult time. I examined his phone records a few days later and discovered that he had been conversing with her on and off all night on D-Day. I knew I had to return home and discover the truth. I traveled 1,000 miles in one day in mid-June and didn't inform him I was coming back. I decided to pass by OW home as I drove through the city on my route to the seaside town where we resided. Now that I had the location, his automobile, wouldn't you know it, was there. It was around 1:30 a.m. I was unwell, so I sobbed and went to our condo, knowing he wouldn't be there. What I saw was quite upsetting. He had removed all of our images, had new boxers, new clothing, more drinks, and so on. His wedding ring was on his nightstand, and the sheets were off the bed. I try not to think of how they were probably together in our bed. This was barely a week or so after he informed me that he wanted a divorce. I spent the night at a motel and confronted him the following evening when I saw our lights turned on and knew he was home. He was passed out drunk on the couch, sand all over the place, beach condo, and absolutely taken aback when he saw me. On his locked phone, I noticed 3 missed calls from her. I apparently just missed her by an hour or two. I wish I had known she was there sooner. Being able to face her in person and kick her out of my house would have felt nice. As he awoke the next morning, he was able to lie again, claiming that she and a buddy, not just the two of them, had been there. There was a fresh package of unopened condoms on the bedside, and he had the most pitiful explanation. I purchased them as a joke with myself. All right, I did make one major mistake today. I slept with him one more time. He made it obvious that this would make no difference, but I was hoping that as a last-ditch effort, he would grasp what we had been missing. Instead, he probably stated the most damaging thing a woman could hear. If you become pregnant, this will wreck everything, he added very immediately thereafter. He treated me as if I were the other lady, as if he had just cheated on his wife. It was dreadful. The weeks that followed were a haze. After he recommended that we file the divorce papers ourselves to save money, I sought a lawyer. It happened all too quickly. Just a few weeks ago, he was telling me how much he loved me, and now he's saying, hey, I'll take all the debt. Maybe $30K, if you sign over the apartment to me. Why do they all think we're foolish when our house was valued more than $225K? At this time, he had essentially moved out of the apartment, residing with friends and his parents. I purchased a PI as well as an auto tracker. I installed a security camera in the house. I went away for a day and saw him FaceTiming her a lot. Remember, he's a timid person who doesn't talk to anybody on the phone. In one video clip, he lied to her, claiming, "Oh, she didn't leave any clean towels for me when she went, so apologies about the noisy washer." Such a strange and pitiful falsehood to get compassion from. Soon after, I discovered that he had been spending every night at OW Place, with the exception of a couple with his parents, according to the tracker. The PI obtained video of them leaving her home in our vehicle, him tormenting her and smiling like an idiot the whole time. When I confronted him with the tracker data, he lied through his teeth, stating, "I've stayed with several pals. Do you want me to show you the proof?" I said. He became enraged and walked away. Don't get me wrong, I knew it was done after that last night of sleeping together. I conducted all of this research because I wanted to know why my marriage was really ending. Not his excuse of "I simply don't love you anymore." I knew this guy, and the other woman's evidence, as painful as it was, made so much more sense. He'd shifted his feelings for me to her. He was nasty and confrontational when he spoke to me and came over to grab some of his belongings. He'd look at me with those shark eyes, as if no one was in there, as if he were a totally separate individual, always departing swiftly and dodging any queries from me. He was irritated by my sobbing and absolutely uncaring. So unlike to the guy I knew and loved. He even came in a few times and recorded me with his phone. His foolish cop brother had told him he needed to defend himself. I can honestly claim that I am not an aggressive person. So the only thing he caught on video was me weeping because he did such a cruel thing to the lady he had known for 14 years. He got in my face a couple times, which was atypical of him, but I knew he was baiting me, hoping I'd give him a cause to obtain a restraining order or something. I discovered a Discord discussion with one of his friends. I just knew a few things. It was upsetting because he had fully put me under the bus. He described me as manipulative, possessive, and lazy. I said that I did not want children and did not want to work. He said that if he wanted to go out, I would always put up a fight. He said that he had been putting on a brave front because he felt obligated to me, but that he wanted to start a new life before it was too late. I couldn't believe it. None of this was real. He was a quiet computer player who never wanted to go out. I heard that cheaters do this to shift the narrative, but it still stings to know that he either persuaded himself of these things or was anxious to seem to be a decent man. I left a message and an email for the OW, nothing aggressive, just giving out the facts. I'd even met her a couple times when doing contract work for their firm, and we'd had a drink. My husband threatened to call the police on me if I ever contacted his coworker, as he refers to her. And if that isn't a mental barrier, I don't know what is. Hearing your husband defend the other woman from me, his wife, was more painful than you can imagine. His wife, who had done nothing wrong but refused to die, not make his escape easy, and not allow him screw me over with a no-fault divorce. After just 11 months, I was able to sell our apartment in a matter of weeks. All cash bids are preferred, and we each received a little sum of money. As soon as it sold, I had to return to my parents' house for the foreseeable future. We are not in agreement on the divorce money, and it seems likely that the divorce will be litigated, which neither of us can afford. He continues to deny having an affair. I remind out that he is now cheating, and just because you told me you want a divorce doesn't imply you're a single guy. He disregards such remarks. Unless it's business, he pretty much ignores everything. I'm gradually improving at NC. Aside from business, he is completely NC. It is quite painful. I had the idea that we were actually great friends, that we had a particular bond. We accomplished everything as a team. He was the only guy I'd ever been with, and I was the only man he'd ever been with. Now I'm cramming in as many medical tests and treatments as I can before losing my insurance, hoping they can eventually find out a diagnosis. Of course, I get to add STD testing to the list. OW is a major Jesus imposter. My spouse is not religious, although I am. She was able to persuade him to start visiting her church. A welcome present from such church was delivered to my parents' house a few weeks ago. What I remembered the name of the church and instantly phoned the pastor, explaining my position and worries. I stated my belief that my spouse might benefit from the guidance of a priest. The OW attempt to draw him to Christ, maybe to atone for her own crimes, did not sit well with me. I received 20 missed calls and a very furious message from my husband on the day the pastor called him. He said he went to her church by alone, that I had damaged the only good thing in his life, and so on. I'd be pleased for him if he discovered faith, but I can't believe how he lies about stuff like this. He was probably simply unhappy that she had been outed as a homewrecker at her church, where she was quite involved, and that she had been sobbing to him all day. I'm aware that statistically, the association between a WS and an AP does not endure, but I also know that my spouse would not throw away his whole life if he wasn't sure. He stayed with her for 2 months before moving into an apartment around 10 minutes away from her house. This is most likely to support the misleading story that their connection began after we split. She has never married and is approaching the age of 30. They work together and have certain hobbies. I'd seen her flirt with my own eyes. I believe she had her eye on him from the start, and when she noticed dissatisfaction in my husband, he was weak and she was ready for him. I thought, like most BS, please everyone except the one he left me for. But I'm also trying to psychologically prepare myself for their possible marriage. I lost my closest friends, my spouse, my house, my security, my trust, and all of my hopes for our future together. I'm hoping to be able to move on from this sometime. When your health is failing and you've spent your whole adult life with one person who is now gone forever, 32 seems extremely old. It really feels like death. Despite all of the horrific things he has done, I still struggle to love him. I'd never accept him back since adultery is a deal breaker for me, but I'm still battling the cognitive dissonance.